Yes, and we are back. We are back right here on the Last Mile Radio, Sirius XM. It's going down. And Chris, I gotta say, man, I'm excited to announce our next guest.
I'm sure you are.
Oh yeah, we got my dog, the big dog, the VP of Checkr.org, and the two hats, and the executive director of the Checkr Foundation. It's going down. We got my boy Ken Oliver in the building. What's happening, man?
What up? Good to be here, Maserati.
Hey,
good to see you, Chris.
Yeah, great to have you.
Welcome to the Last Mile Radio.
Yeah, for sure.
We really appreciate you doing this, and man, you are doing some phenomenal work.
Yes.
And you have an amazing story about how you got here as well. Like, you are doing some change maker stuff, but let's dive back a little bit, and because it's so interesting and inspirational for people to understand, like, background and then transformation and where you are today. So can you take us back a little bit about, being incarcerated, what that life was like, and then when that journey of transformation really started?
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you asking the question. I appreciate you all having me. Go back to 1996. We were right in the thick of the three strikes law, especially here in LA County. And I was a passenger in a stolen vehicle in, I think, January of 1996. We get pulled over by the police, and, I'm thinking I'm going to bail out. It's a, 60-day, 90-day type of charge. And they gave me a $600,000 bail and told me I was facing life in prison.
Wow.
And so, fast forward a year, I end up getting life in prison. I go to prison with a 52-year life sentence.
Wow. Because you had previous strikes, and this was your third strike.
I had previous strikes when I was younger. I had been out at the time about 5 or 6 years, had stayed, trouble-free, and then had this infraction, which, anywhere in the country, just to get perspective, is 30-day slap on the wrist, type of offense. And the judge, when he sentenced me, said, this is joyriding. And he said, even though I don't think you don't deserve life in prison, I'm bound by the law, and gave me life in prison. So I didn't believe in my mind, to be honest with you. It didn't dawn on me that I would die in prison. So, when I got to prison, I made it my business to do a lot of reading and keep free. The only thing they couldn't take from me, they took my body. They restricted my physical movements, but they couldn't take my mind.
Come on, man.
So I said, you know what? I'm going to double down and read business, history, philosophy, politics, and prepare myself for the time when the gates open. I didn't know when it was going to be. I mean, it could have been tomorrow. It could have been 30 years from now, but I knew I was going to be ready.
Let me just interject here. You're given a life sentence, which means you probably did you enter at a level 4 prison?
Oh yeah. I did most of my time at level 4 maximum security.
So just to give a perspective, there are no programs in level 4.
No programs.
You have to be totally self-generated there to do anything, right?
100%.
So talk about that experience a little bit.
Sure. Well, I grew up my story is a cliche. I grew up in gang neighborhoods in South Central LA, and went to prison, had an affiliation from my neighborhood where I grew up at. And, the level 4 prison, you're either going to dive headfirst into nihilism, of some sort, or you're going to try to find a lane to carve out for yourself. And what I did, which is kind of very unique, is I kind of straddled both. And what I thought that I could do is I thought that I could change the culture of the way gang members thought. So rather than say I have to change who I am as a gang member, because, we are who we are and we are from where we are from, I thought, well, what about if we just change the mentality of the homies? And instead of be out there sagging, thugging, trying to, sell stuff on the yard, why don't we think about how we can open up businesses? Why don't we think about how we can take back over our neighborhoods? Why don't we think about economic development, investing and all that type of stuff? And so what I really try to do is draw an analogy of what the Italian mafia does, right? Because when they go into these places, they set up shops, they own restaurants, they own businesses, et cetera. And it's really just a perspective and a mind shift rather than doing stuff that's self-destructive and just causes us to be in prison and we just commit a gang of senseless murders against our own people.
Real talk.
So, I knew that in order to be able to convince folks that I had to have a lot of education. But, I didn't think of education as a K through 12 education. I thought of education as what we call in the hood game.
Right. Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
So the game could come from Warren Buffett. It could come from, Donald Trump. I read The Art of the Deal, right? It could come from, Tolstoy. It could come from, a wide variety of different sources that gives you a potpourri of knowledge to allow you to navigate things in life, whether that be emotional intelligence, whether that be business, et cetera. So I really immersed myself in that. And then doing that, the more you know, the more enlightened you become, the more dangerous you become to prison officials.
Absolutely.
And, prison officials started to believe, just based on the fact the way that I mobilized people. I was a MAC chairman at 3 maximum security prisons, and I wasn't one of those MAC chairmen that like decided to hang out with the police. I was a MAC chairman that decided that, we have power as a population.
What is a MAC chairman?
Yeah, a MAC chairman is a person that represents all of the races on the yard with the with the prison administration.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go in and like make demands on the prison administration about programs and different things to bring in. And, a big part of the way I got out was there was a lot of resistance involved, and I would organize people to resist some of the things that prison officials were pushing on us in level 4 prisons, like doing interviews when the incident happened.
Right.
So just as an example, like in a level 4 prison, they would lock something down when someone got assaulted, and then they would do these individual interviews where they would take people out one at a time and take them in a private place where no one could see. And then after like a month of doing that, they would come up with this body of knowledge of people that, what we call snitching.
Right.
And then they would refuse to let us off lockdown if we didn't participate. So I felt that that was wrong. I felt like trying to take people out, forcing them to give information to prison officials was something that we weren't compelled to do. Like,
right.
I'm not compelled to do that. Yeah. And so I would organize bodies of people to do that. And so
and just that prison, that power dynamic that you're talking about is somewhat threatening. And how were you dealt with in the system with that power dynamic that you were increasingly getting?
That's an interesting question. So what happened is they started to think in their mind that like I was able to do too much mobilizing of people around issues, right? Mm-hmm. Especially around programming and other things. It wasn't just the example I gave. And so, I was a voracious reader. I never did a day in prison where I didn't have at least 100 books in my cell. And one day they came in to do a cell search, and they found a book by George Jackson.
Oh, you get in trouble for that book.
Yeah, so they find a book by George Jackson, which was one of about 100 books that I had. And I had the book for 10 years. And I got the book through Amazon.com. My girlfriend had sent me the book through Amazon.com.
And what was the essence of the book?
The book was, George Jackson, let me give you a little history on George Jackson, then I'll talk about the book. So George Jackson is probably the most famous prisoner in American history.
Mm-hmm, right.
And he was a young black man from Pasadena, California, not too far from here, who went to jail and got life in prison for a $70 gas station robbery at 19. And then while he was in prison, he became politicized. He became part of the Black Panther Party. He became like just an astounding intellect. He was a political theoretician in a time in American history that was very volatile in reference to civil rights, in reference to the Black Power movement, in reference to revolutionary struggles that were happening across the world, both in Cuba and over in Angola and Africa. And he mastered his craft and became like just a genius in his mid-20s. He was like, a political Tupac, right? He was just like, he was on one. And he also happened to be a very tough individual. He was a black belt in martial arts, self-taught, an imposing figure, 6'2", 220, and, basically he was dangerous.
He was a force to be reckoned with, for sure.
And so they locked him in solitary confinement, and they would never let him out because they thought he was a danger, right? Mm-hmm. Because of his political awareness. And so what's interesting about George Jackson is he really represents the trajectory of a lot of young black men in inner cities all across America. And he wrote about that. He wrote about the expectation of either dying by 21 or ending up in prison. And so it's really the autobiography of Malcolm X and George Jackson, Soledad Brothers, is kind of like an introduction for any young black person that comes to prison. Like old heads will tell you, like, you have to read this.
Yeah.
You have to read Soledad Brothers, and you have to read the autobiography of Malcolm X, because that gives you a foundation of understanding who you are as a young black person, young black man, who most of us when we come to prison don't know what that is.
Sure.
Right. My first introduction to Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X happened in a prison cell rather than a school building.
So what was the result of that then?
The result of that was that they came in my cell, they found a book by George Jackson, and they said, we think you're the minister of education for the black guerrilla family.
Oh, wow.
And you have way too much books in here, way too many political books. And they did an investigation. They sent me to administrative segregation, left me there for, 8-9 months.
Wow.
They put yellow tape on my cell like a murder had happened, and refused to let anybody in.
And to let people know this is basically solitary, as people refer to that,
Absolutely.
or the shoe.
Solitary confinement. And I'll never forget, they have what they call the goon squad, that investigates these things. And he comes to my cell and he says, Ken, do I think that you're the Minister of Education for the Black Relief Movement? No, I don't. He said, but you are scaring the warden with the stuff that you have in your cell, like the books and all of that. And like, I've been told by the higher ups to get rid of you. And I said, what do you mean get rid of me? I said, I haven't done anything. There was no kites dropped on me, no 1030s. I hadn't done anything, but just have these books in my cell, right? And they said, he put his head down. He said, they're going to send you solitary and you never get out.
Wow.
Damn.
And that's what they did. They sent me a piece of paper on a 128B chrono and said that you're going to solitary confinement indefinitely.
Wow.
And so I got, first I got shipped off to the Bay, then I went to Corcoran.
The Bay, Pelican Bay?
Yeah. And went to Corcoran and I was
two very isolated places, by the way.
Very isolated places where, for people that don't know, solitary confinement is, they say it's like 23 hours a day. It's not 23 hours a day, it's 24 hours a day.
Right.
And then twice a week, you get to go out to a dog kennel under escort, shackles, to a dog kennel size cage is about 8 by 9. You can't take 4 steps in any direction with a steel toilet, and that's your recreation.
Yeah.
So.
And how do you keep a positive perspective when this is going on?
That's a great question.
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I first got locked in solitary, because I was politically conscious, I immediately understood that this is the same thing they did to my ancestors during slavery, where they forbid Black people to read. That enlightening yourself as a Black man specifically was scary to people who are in power.
Right.
And so rather than like capitulate, I doubled down. And I said, you know what? I said, I don't believe that it's legal in the 21st century to put a person in a prison underneath a prison for reading a book. So I started studying the law. And I said, I'm going to master constitutional law.
Wow.
And I did that and filed during the course of my solitary confinement, reading, became my safety valve to keep myself sane. And I read every single case that every Supreme Court in the United States ever came out with around freedom of speech in the First Amendment, around the 14th Amendment, the different branches of due process, around the 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment, et cetera, the 6th Amendment right to trial, and really started to understand how they had woven this tapestry of the justice system together, because I knew if I was going to play chess, if I was going to beat my enemy at chess, I needed to master chess,
right.
Legal chess.
Can't combat what you don't know exists.
You can't combat what you don't know. And I was watching so many people around me, because it's an emotional thing when you get put in solitary. Thousands of people in solitary, a lot longer than me. I was there almost 9 years. There were people there for 20, 30 years. Hugo Pinnell was there for 40 years. And they were quick to like file against like the evidence, like, oh, they locked me up because I had my homie in my phone book. And people would like file lawsuits, but they were constantly losing, getting kicked out of court. And so what I did is like I zoomed out and started thinking, okay, why are all these people losing? Because they're challenging something they can never win, because there's a very low threshold. Courts don't want to micromanage prisons, so they give a large deal of deference to wardens and departments of correction, And so I said, what I need to do is challenge the infrastructure of the Department of Correction, get away from the evidence. I need to challenge the constitutionality of the infrastructure that CDC had built for 50 years. This had been going on since the early 70s, where they were locking people up. Just Maserati has a conversation with me on the yard. If an IGI person has something against Maserati, they can lock him up and say he's an associate of Ken. Ken's validated. You're going to the hole forever.
Right.
No evidence, no anything. We could have been talking baseball.
Right. Even having those books, they could validate you. When I was in Solano, I had the George Jackson book, and they confiscated that from me and threatened to validate me and say I was going to be in a game.
That's
I'm like, what?
Right.
Like, it was nuts.
Right. They were manufacturing cases, and so what would happen is like the IGI, if there was a thread of something where they didn't like you or you rubbed somebody, then they would try to like, okay, how can I eradicate Maserati? And then they would like manufacture these cases. Let me go through his phone book and see if he has any single person in our system that has been validated before. He might not have talked to the person for 10 years. It might have been his cousin. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
Oh, he has a George Jackson book? Okay, that's one piece. Let me see if I can put the other pieces together. Next thing you know, he's in solitary forever. It happened to a lot of guys.
Right. So you're on this journey in solitary.
Yeah.
How does that evolve to the point where you can get out of there?
Sure.
And then start the journey to get released? Because at this point, you talked about going in 96.
Yep.
Way different ball
Nobody
game.
was getting out.
No.
Yeah, way different.
Nobody
ball
was
game.
getting out. No lifers were getting out, like less than 2%.
No.
So you have to keep that mental positiveness, positive energy, because no one's getting out. And you have to say, how am I going to get out of this box?
100%.
So how did you do that?
So there were a couple of things that kept. I just want to double click on how I kept my sanity, because the last mile actually, ironically enough, and it's funny how things come full circle, played a role in my sanity in kind of a vicarious way. So while I was studying law, also I was telling Bev earlier, like one of the things I thought about, like if I'm ever able to get out of here, I need to be able to hit the ground running, because I don't want to put an orange vest on and go pick up stuff on the side of the freeway. Right. And I said, I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always been interested in like what's on the cutting edge of like business, making money, success. And at the time, like tech was doing a lot of big things. There were a lot of like mergers and acquisitions. People were buying companies. And, I used to tell my family, like, send me all the Inc. magazines, the Wired magazines, the Entrepreneur magazines, the TechCrunch magazines. And I used to read a lot about tech. And then I read an article one day, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, about the last mile, right? This was like in 2011, 2012, 13, somewhere up in there. And it was about this program in San Quentin that was opening up. And at the time, they were talking about entrepreneurship more so than coding. Right. It was the entrepreneurship piece. Yep. And I'm like, oh, man, if I could ever get out of here, like I'm going to San Quentin because I'm getting ready to get in that program and I'm going to make something happen, right?
For sure.
And then a few weeks later, I read about a program called Project Remade, which was out of Stanford.
That's right.
That was happening, was an entrepreneurship program. I'm like, oh, yeah, there's some programs out there that I can get involved with. So I actually wrote to the last mile in San Quentin while I was in solitary confinement. I told Bev to look up in the archives, because I'm sure you guys have a couple letters from Ken Oliver from solitary confinement at Corcoran. And so that helped keep me sane, because I used to listen to this podcast called Business Rockstars. That used to come on, and it was an interview podcast similar to this, where they would interview entrepreneurs, tech people who are on the cutting edge with new businesses. And I was just fascinated by opportunity. And I said, I'm gonna make something happen, because these people aren't any smarter than me. I know if I can just focus and get my weight up, right, that I can make similar stuff happen.
Absolutely.
From a creative standpoint. And so we did some hunger strikes in 2012 and then 2014, where we organized the largest hunger strikes in American history in an indoor facility. 30,000 people at one point participated.
This is in Pelican Bay, right?
Pelican Bay, Corcoran, all the prisons, though.
I was in Folsom. I participated as well in Folsom.
Yeah, so we did a hunger strike. And what a lot of people don't know, 4 dudes died in the building that I was in from hunger strike. And so like we talk about like solitary, we talk about these things, but like there were men that sacrificed their life for a bigger cause for this. And then as a result of those hunger strikes, lawyers from across the country, the United Nations came out and said that anything past 30 days is considered to be torture. The Constitutional Law Center in Pennsylvania came out, and a cabal of attorneys came together to basically bring CDC to its knees, and did such a remarkable job that CDC agreed to stop validating people based on status, that there actually had to be some type of action behind putting someone in solitary. So they let us out in 2016. So I was part of that wave and that movement that got released to the main line. They sent, because my points had dropped over all those years I was in solitary, like your points are dropping every year for not getting any write-ups.
Right.
And I qualified for level 2, and I tried hard to get to San Quentin, couldn't get there. And they sent me to Soledad Central. And so I get to Soledad. I still have no idea when I'm going to get out. I'm under the 3 strikes law. My earliest possible release date is 2048.
Wow.
And let me back up a little bit. While I'm in solitary, the 3 strikes law changed. This is how Kenyatta got out.
Right. Prop 36.
Prop 36.
That's
and
right.
So the DA in LA County refused to consider my case because I was validated as a prison gang member.
Right.
And so they were like, ain't no way in the world we're going to let Ken Oliver out of prison. And so Stanford University came in and helped me with my case. And then all this time, my lawsuit that I filed for being validated is pending in federal court. Like it took me 4 years to write that lawsuit because I was so busy and meticulous about trying to get that right. And it just sat up there for like 2-3 years, right? And when I got released to Soledad, I remember they said, Oliver, we want you to go up to the visiting room because there's a judge from the federal court that wants to talk to you. And so I get escorted up there, and I go in there, and there's this judge on this big video monitor, and he says, hi, I'm Judge so-and-so. Do you know who I am? I'm like, no. And he said, I'm the one that's been sitting on your lawsuit for the last couple of years.
Wow.
And what I want to ask you is what do you want? Right? And I said, what do you mean what I want? He said, well, you wrote this lawsuit. And he said, it's a good suit. He said, but you didn't say what you wanted. And I said, yes, I did. I said, for an amount to be determined at trial, which is my right to do. Right? Because in when you file federal stuff, if you put a number on it, you may cap yourself out. So what you do is you leave it open and leave it up to the jury to decide what the award should be. Like if you say like, oh, I want $1 million, even if your case is worth 10, all you can get is $1 million.
So that's what you asked. Like
So you leave it open. You say like for an amount to be determined, right? If you think you have a strong case. And he said, oh, I know. The judge, I know you have a right to like say that. He said, but I want to know, like, what do you want? I said, that's a good question. I said, I haven't thought about it. I said, but one thing I do know in the state of California, it's $150 a day for false imprisonment. So if we add that up, and I did this to him, I said, for the 8.5 years that I've been there, just for me to answer my name, if you called me, it'd probably cost $750,000 just for me to get in the room and have a conversation with you. I said, and I'm not saying I would settle for that. That's just what I might answer my name for. He said, oh, great. He said, no worries. He said, that's beautiful, right? He said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go talk to the Attorney General, and we're going to call you back in a couple weeks, and I'll tell you what happened, and we'll have a second conversation. I said, okay. So they escorted me back to the block. Now, Soledad has this huge, huge hallway. It takes about 10 minutes to walk, up and down. And by the time I got to the cell block at the end, they're telling me I got to go back. So they escort me back. I wait in the room about 15 minutes. The judge comes back in. He said, I just walked down the hallway and talked to the Attorney General. He's fine with what you said. They want to come up and talk to you at Soledad. Are you okay with them coming to talk to you at Soledad? Now, I'm not game goofy. Like if Attorney General of California wants to come see me at Soledad Prison, I know what he's going to do. He's going to come with the briefcase and the blank check for $10,000.
Right.
To try to get me to sell out for because cats sell out for canteen and packages, and $10,000 is a lot of money in prison for people who don't have any money. And so you want to see me without representation. I don't have an attorney. I filed this pro se.
Right.
You want to like get me in the visiting room and try to see if you can catch a number. So I said, yeah, you can come see me. I'm cool with it. So I immediately went out and called my attorneys at Mike Romano at Stanford, who was representing me on my 3 strikes case.
Shout out to Mike Romano.
Shout out to Mike Romano, right? That's my man. Susan Champion, Melania Blake, they do great work, on behalf of people that are part of 3 strikes in California. So I called him. I said, listen, I just had this like bizarre experience where this judge calls me up. He tells me, talk to the Attorney General. They want to come see me about my suit. And I said, should I see him? He was like, absolutely not. He said, we're going to call the judge tomorrow. We'll sit in for you and put in a change of attorney for you, take you off a pro se, and then we'll talk to the Attorney General. So they called the Attorney General, and the Attorney General was like, oh, wait, we didn't know he was represented by you all, right? We weren't saying that we want to come up there. We were saying we might want to come up there. So they
they're trying to backpedal and clean that up quick.
They tried to clean
you don't
it up.
want to get on the bad side of Mike Romano.
Facts.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Mike's a great attorney.
Definitely.
So they capitulate. They back up, and then Mike Romano, keenly enough, because they're a small clinic at Stanford, they do criminal justice work. This is a civil case. So they brought in this huge law firm called Mayer Brown, which is like, they do like $10 billion a year in billing. They do, stuff all over the world. And they came up to see me, and this lawyer, who has turned out to be like my very best friend in the world, his name is Ward Johnson. He comes up with like 3 attorneys, and they interview me. And after he hears like what happened to me, he said, Ken, he looked at me and said, Ken, we're going to get you out of prison, and we're going to get you paid. He said, because what they did to you is unconstitutional. And so they kind of like took over my civil case, and 6 months later, they formed a meeting with the Attorney General, CDCR, the judge, and he told, and I love telling this story, he goes to tell his lawyers at his Palo Alto office, he says, listen, and he's talking to 10 of them, and he says, we're going to go in here with our trial best suits on, our best briefcases, and we're going to go in here and we're going to tell the Attorney General of California that if they don't let Ken out of prison and they don't settle this case, we're going to make their life miserable. And we're going to bring the weight of Mayer Brown on them. And we're willing to go all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. That's what he told them.
Wow.
And so they end up going, like this bevy of attorneys, with the Stanford attorneys, but with all these Mayer Brown attorneys, and they go up to the Northern District federal courthouse. And they spent all day negotiating. And when they were done, they called me up. I'm sitting up there in the legal visiting room. And they said, Ken, it's over.
Just like that.
We got you a settlement, and you're going to be going home.
Wow.
Right? And
blessings.
So, I got that blessing. And it took like 6 months to work the paperwork out with the LA Superior Court. And I ended up getting out of prison. And so that's kind of how this whole thing happened.
That's amazing.
That's deep. That's deep. And we chopping it up with my dog, man. Ken Oliver, the VP at Checkr.org, and gotta put the "and" on that, and executive director of the Checkr Foundation. It's going down. And it's been a hell of a journey.
That is amazing. You get out. You had a 52 to life sentence. You get out of prison, and you've got this momentum in your mind. We talk a lot about go mode. Right?
Oh, go mode is real.
So Ken, you had go mode when you were in the shoe, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
put this guy out in the marketplace with go mode. What's going to happen?
I was on some Chef Curry stuff, to be honest with you.
It
I mean,
was going down.
just in reference to like my drive and ambition. So, you know, I'm from LA, and one of the conditions of my release is that I go to the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know.
My neck of the woods.
Yeah, I don't know anybody in Oakland. I end up going to a house with this woman, an attorney named Kate Chatfield, and Erline is there, living there. He had just got out a little bit earlier from Ear Hustle.
That's actually where we met.
Yeah, that is actually where we met, because you came over with
Adnan.
with Adnan, and you were doing your music thing right there at the kitchen table. That's right. That is how we met.
Yep. Me and Banks had a show that night.
Yeah, it show did. It does come full circle.
Yeah,
I'm in a halfway house in West Oakland.
Yep.
And that's where I meet Maserati. But Erlan lived there at the time.
Yep.
And so I told Erlan, like, listen, man, I got to get into tech. Because while I was in solitary confinement, I'd been watching all of this activity happen in tech. And I said, this is where I'm going to make my bread.
Right.
Like, I'm going to take my entrepreneur stuff, and this is where I'm going to sprinkle it. And I'm going to, And, Erlan wasn't in tech at the time. He was in the podcast. And I said, man, listen, I need to talk to somebody in tech, right? So he hooks me up with Kenyatta. So this is how I end up meeting Kenyatta. And so Kenyatta comes over, and I say, Kenyatta, listen, I want to talk to like Beverly and Chris. I said, I tried to get in San Quentin for like 6-7 years and couldn't get there. Man. Right. And I said, like, I'm relentless. I'm like a pit. Like, I'm not going to stop.
Locked in, yeah.
So I said, listen, what I want to do is, like, what happens to the 95% or 90% of people that can never get into San Quentin? Right? Because most people in CDCR can't get to San Quentin.
That's right.
Right. And so I taught, when I was Soledad, just backing up a little bit, along with somebody who ended up becoming my co-founder, a business and entrepreneurship class in Soledad of about 60 guys that we used to teach. And we used to read Jim Collins and other entrepreneur stuff. And then we report back and we develop these plans. But it was very organic. It wasn't like a structured program. It was a group. Mm-hmm. And I said, listen, man, I said, there's a whole bunch of talent, a whole bunch of will, a whole bunch of hunger for cats that want to be an entrepreneur. You know how cats is. I'm gonna be a real estate person. It's like Wall Street. it's a million of those cats around, right?
Yeah, facts.
100%, right?
That
White, Mexican, Black, Asians, they want to do it. And so he said, okay, I'm gonna talk to him. Now I'm just gonna tell you what he said. I don't know if this is true or not, but I gotta unpack it. So he said, like, you know what? They're highly focused on the prison piece of it. They don't want to like get into the reentry space at this time, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was my first, like, what I consider to be like a door shut on me. I'm like, damn. Okay, I can't like use this as a vehicle, right?
But he never actually talked to us.
No, I never got a chance to talk to him. But I'm just keeping it 100. This is how this is how this unfolded, because and this is important because this is what led to Crop.
That's deep,
right? So I'm at the halfway house. I've been out about 30 days. I've checked into Merritt College. I'm getting my paralegal certification, but I have this bug in me that's like messing with my head at night, right, about this tech stuff. And after that experience, right. And this is right when next chapter was about to open up. So Kenyatta was in transition anyway. I was also part of Defy Ventures when I got out. I was right in the middle of the program in Soledad when I was released. And I called Defy up and I was like, I was in the program in Soledad. Like, I'm hungry. I'm ready. Like, show me the way. Oh, are you an EIT? I said,
what's
no,
EIT?
An EIT is an entrepreneur in training. So these are people who have graduated the program. You get the title of like EIT.
Okay.
And so they said, did you graduate? No. And they said, oh, if you didn't graduate, we don't have anything for you on the streets. I said, well, wait a minute. I was in the middle of the program. It sounds like, I'm not for sure. It sounds like that I'm being excised out because I got released from prison. No, we're not saying that. We're just saying that our services are set up for people who are graduates from the program. This is 2019. And so I'm thinking to myself, you know what? This is crazy. Right. Now here you got somebody getting out of prison who is probably one of the hungriest. I'm like a wolf at this time to get into tech, right? And I can't get anybody to open the door for me. And so what I said, I'm going to create my own stuff. So I sat at that table that you recorded your music on, and I started writing a business plan. And I said, I'm going to build the Stanford of reentry programs. I'm going to build a program where people come out and it looks like the first year of college. You have a campus that you live at. I'm going to provide the optimal learning experience for you. I'm going to take care of your housing. I'm going to clothe you. You're going to be fed and food and all the rest of that. And the only thing I want you to do is park your game right here for 1 year, learn, right? And I was thinking UX design, UI, touch points that were lower than engineering, because the reality is that most of my homies, and I'm doing this from personal experience, aren't going to do the ones and zeros.
Right.
They aren't the ones that are going to go through Hack Reactor. And so when I think about scale, well, wait a minute, there's marketing, there's project management, there's product managers, there's go-to-market, there's sales, there's all these different other touch points in tech. And, 70% of the jobs in tech aren't engineering related. So I said, I'm going to build this myself based on my lived experience. And I wrote this business plan. And so while I'm writing the business plan, I'm also working at LSPC, where I also met you doing organizing. I was a state policy director, pushing policy, voting rights, and all the other stuff for criminal justice reform. And so a lot of the things that I did was go to some of these tech companies and talk about ban the box. I went to Google, Fitbit, and all these companies. I'm talking to HR leaders and others about what ban the box mean, what the compliance of the law means from an advocate's perspective. And I would always try to take the conversation a step further. Forget ban the box. Ban the box is cool. But what about creating internship programs, paid apprenticeship programs, and creating pathways for justice impacted people to get in the door? Right. And most of them were open to it, to be surprisingly enough. They're like, Ken, this sounds amazing. We'd love to do this out of our corporate social responsibilities. But talk to us about the skills that they have, the people. Now, the only thing they got in prison, authorized office services.
For the most part,
places,
for
right?
real.
Except San Quentin, right? Most places just office services.
Are vocational.
Yeah, it's
and that's hit and miss, really, depending on where you at. For the most part, it's office stuff, and then most programs, I would say the most common is not even, in my opinion, a work field skill, but NA. That was everywhere. NA, AA. I done been to yards where that was the only program they had.
Right.
And it's damn, you got nothing else? That's crazy.
So you created this business idea, CROP, and you'll tell us what CROP stands for. But then you ended up getting funded.
Yeah.
So tell us that, because this is pretty amazing.
So we gotta get the journey, man.
So I'll segue you into this. So I'm writing this business plan, and at the time I was calling it the Phoenix Project, right? And then a friend of mine who was at San Quentin, his name is Ted Gray, and him and a group of people at Soledad, him and his crew, had created this ecosystem of groups at Soledad that kind of mirrored San Quentin, but didn't have the resources of San Quentin or the volunteer stuff. But they had groups where they were trying to change the mindset of prison. So they did a lot of things on personal leadership, which is what they became famous for, where they were getting Senate recognition for teaching about accountability and agency and how to make decisions that held you accountable to the outcomes that you were receiving in life. It was a very beautiful thing that they had developed there. And he gets commuted by Governor Newsom while he's at San Quentin. So he gets out, him and his crime partner, and we connect, and he says, we want to go back into prison to continue to teach the personal leadership piece. And right about the time that he wanted to do that is the lockdown for COVID. This is April 2020.
Okay.
So the prisons had shut down.
Yeah.
They don't have a place to go to do what they've done. Both him and his crime partner and his crew had been in prison for 20 years from the time they were kids, 20 years old. Damn. And I told him, listen, there's something else. Because the prison program has a ceiling on it. And, I don't like ceilings, I said, listen, there's another opportunity. I said, we can build the Stanford of reentry, and I'm going to tell you how. This is what I've seen. This is what I've been doing. These are the companies that I'm talking to. Ran down the business plan to him, which was going to involve, personal leadership development, soft skill training, boot camp style training, and all these different tracks. Then working with employers to teach them how to onboard and have change management in the companies to receive talent. And then also work with housing providers to teach them to receive people who had livable wage jobs, et cetera, with no credit history, et cetera. And he asked me point blank, he said, do you think we can raise money for it? And I said, well, I've been talking to a couple people, including the cat at Amazon. And he told me that if I put this together right, I can get 10, 15 million bucks overnight.
Nice.
So he said, Ken, if I bring you in here, he said, we're trusting you, because they're fresh out. So they don't really understand the ecosystem the way that I did at the time. He said, we're going to be relying heavily on you. I said, giddy up, load up, right? So they bring me on. So I leave my job at LSPC and I go work for CROP, which was creating restorative opportunities and programs. It was actually a nonprofit that was started in prison to generate activities and positive programming for men, including the personal leadership piece that him and his team had done. So they brought me in. I was, it was 4 guys, and they brought me in. I was the 5th one, and I just went to work. I leveraged my policy experience. I leveraged working with companies like Google and the UC Berkeley Goldman School of Policy to get evaluation pieces put together, and just also continued to build relationships with people like Jobs for the Future, JFF, and just companies all across America to put this like thing together. And then started having a lot of policy conversations. And it started actually with a conversation with Ted and his crime, thanking the governor for the commutation that they got. And we had this plan, like when you're in there in front of the governor's office, right, speaking to Gavin Newsom, like, tell him we coming and we want some money. And this is what we're trying to do. And they did. And he said, you know, Governor Newsom said, listen, he basically parked that. He said, look, I can't personally give you like money.
Right.
He said, but if you're able to convince the legislature, because your plan sounds amazing, then I'm in full support of the plan. And so we went to work, and I started getting on the phone with these policymakers and you know, doing what I know how to do on the policy front. And I'll never forget it. It was a Hail Mary, really, because we're asking for $27 million. I'm 2 years out of prison. They're 1 year out of prison. We had no real track record other than what we had done in prison. And one day I get a call from the budget analyst for the assembly, and she says, Ken, you know, we had our vote today about, you know, the budget. This is a budget ask. And like her voice didn't sound like I was going to get it, so I was already prepared like to get shot down. And she says, you remember how I told you to have a second option? I'm like, oh, you know, because she had told me like, I'm asking for a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, I remember. And she like, well, we don't need the second option. They're going to give you the whole $27 million. I said, what? Hell no, right? So I was like, I couldn't believe it, right? Literally, I got emotional, got choked up with tears.
I bet.
And she said, you know, you can't tell anybody though until like we come out with the budget. She said, but I'm telling you, they're going to give it to you. And they gave us the $27 million. Then a kind of a other funny thing happened. Another senator who I'd worked closely with during the budget revise calls me up like 2 months later. Now the governor's already signed the budget. And she says, Ken, we're revising with some other monies that we have, and this is during a budget surplus. Do you still need money for the project that you were talking about, like the campus that you're building out, the tech training program? And I'm like, well, you guys know you gave us $27 million, right? She said, oh, I know. She said, but do you need more? I'm like,
Always use
yeah,
some more money.
we could always use some more. And so they gave us another $1.5 million to build the housing campus. She said, well, we're going to give this to you just to put towards property to build out the campus. So we ended up getting $28.5 million.
Wow.
2 years out of prison to build this campus, tech training campus for justice impacted men and women, and to do all the things that we kind of set out to do. And so it was.
That's amazing.
That's incredible.
So yeah.
That is incredible, man. I can't even lie. As you sitting here telling the story, bro, my heart beating, and I know the conclusion. Like, of course, you know, I know you, and I'm going through it. Like, damn, is you finna get it? Is you know, like, you know what I mean? That is a trip, bro. To overcome all the things you did, I feel like that is an excellent display of what Frederick Douglass was talking about as far as education being the pathway to freedom.
That's right.
You know what I mean? You was able to overcome all those different obstacles and overcome, I'm talking about a immeasurable amount of oppression, you know what I mean, and dehumanization, and keep that intact, but overall prevail. Like, that is nuts, man. That's inspiration on a whole nother level. I
appreciate that. And the capstone, it hasn't even come yet. So you remember I talked about earlier in the podcast, I was thinking about tech. This is go back to 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And literally every single day, I was thinking about app and applications and what kind of web development and what kind of applications could I think about while I was in prison to get out there and like get one of those $1 billion buyouts from a Facebook or whoever, because I was reading about this every single day. There was just a fury of activity. I'm like, there's trillions of dollars changing hands, and like, I'm not part of this, right? Now I was intent on being part of it. So fast forward, and then I got this $28.5 million, we as an organization, and I get a call from somebody at a tech company. Now, I had no idea how I was going to get into tech. Like, there was no mapped out plan for me to get into tech.
But that was the goal, though.
But nonprofit, it kind of called me when I came out, right? It chose me. I didn't even get a chance to choose. Like, I still haven't like detoxed or decompressed my prison experience yet, because I've just been running since I've been home. This tech company calls me and like, hey, we're getting ready to operationalize our corporate social responsibility program. We just took the Pledge 1%, Mark Benioff stuff from Salesforce. And we're looking for somebody that has proximity to what our mission is, which is fair chance hiring and all of that. And we also want to build a corporate foundation. So we want somebody that has 501c3 experience. And so someone told us that you would be great for the job, right? And are you willing to talk to us? So at the time, like I'm fresh off of getting almost $30 million from the governor of the state. And I'm real big on living up to my commitments. Like, I had made a lot of promises, built a lot of relationships, and a lot of people had invested in me and the organization. So at first I told him, no, I'm straight, right? Like I'm cool. I got a lot of work ahead of me. And so they said, okay, like we respect that. And then they ended up like calling me again in a couple of weeks. And they're like, hey, we just want to have another conversation with you. So I said, oh, sure, I'll have a conversation with you. So we had that second conversation. And then the second conversation, they started talking tech dynamics. Now, for those people who don't know what tech dynamics is, tech pays a lot different than nonprofits, right? They have things. They have things like equity packages and stock and pay and like scales, and it's like they got me dizzy. And so like, you know, I called my pops and I remember telling him like, listen, this is like nonprofit is like high school football. It's cool and everybody likes to go to a good game and it's good, it's exciting, but when tech calls, that's like getting a call from the NFL. That's like the NFL calling. And so can I responsibly, as someone who's 2 years out of prison, like shut the door on an opportunity that may never, ever come again? They were offering to make me a VP at a tech company that just had a $5 billion valuation. And I thought to myself, if I leave my fellas and I leave this, I need to create a solution before I think about it. And so I started thinking in my mind, like, who in the state that was justice impacted could take on this like BHAG thing that I'd created, right? Because it was a huge vision. Like the purpose of creating the campus was about systemic change. It wasn't about like one program in Oakland training 50 people a year. This was about how to change the model for justice impacted people and what we need upon reentry, right, to be successful, and the way that we can add a value proposition. And so I said, man, you know, Sam Lewis, he's already at ARC. Jay Jordan is already at Alliance for Safety and Justice. I mean, Kenyatta's already at Next Chapter. I'm thinking about all the like leaders that I know. And I thought about, you know, this woman who is a remarkable woman named Tara Lawyer, very smart. And I'd already tapped her to be, she was still working at the organization she was at, but I told her, when I do the housing piece, I'm going to bring you over as a housing director. And because of her brilliance, she was getting her BA degree in business. I called her up. I said, Tara, I got this dilemma. I got this huge vision that's kind of like come to fruition. The bus is built. What I need is somebody that can drive it to its destination. Like, I don't need you to change the rims or the steering wheel. All that's already built. And I said, do you think you can handle it? I said, because to me, the ideal situation is to balance this out with gender equity, to bring a woman into an organization run by 5 lifers, to have her lead and offer her value proposition, I thought would bring a nice balance to what we were trying to do. And, you know, she ended up saying yes to it, which gave me an out. There were some selfish motivations for me to get out, but I felt confident about her leadership, introduced her to the team and said, this is who I think can take my place. And I think the transition will be relatively small. I agreed to jump over to the board, and the rest is history. I ended up going to Checkr, and now I'm the VP over there doing this work all across the country with CEOs and others and all of that. So that's kind of...
It's been a journey, kid. It's been a journey, bro. My goodness, there's so many things to take away from that.
I think it's flower time again.
Oh, definitely. You already know. So one thing I'm big on, man, is giving people their flowers, bro. And I'm pretty sure you already know, but if you don't, one of the purposes of giving people their flowers, man, a lot of times people get their credit when they dead and gone, and they get the flowers on their grave. You know what I mean? So I want to give them to you while you still can smell it, man, and express that appreciation. You know what I mean? And commend you for that, bro, because that's big. That's big for so many different reasons. But in my opinion, one of the main reasons, though, is the level of inspiration. Like when you see somebody do something that can quite literally alter your trajectory of what you feel you can do. You know what I mean? So hearing the things that you accomplished, hearing how you was able to remain resilient and ultimately prevail. Somebody like me, I know if I wasn't in the position I'm in now, hearing this type of stuff, I would have been like, man, as soon as I get out of prison, it's on. You know what I mean? Like, it's on. Can't nothing stop me.
That's
for
right.
sure.
That's
so
right.
like that in my opinion is quite literally the makeup of the things that can make unstoppable people realize they're unstoppable.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And that's big.
Well, I'm a big fan, Maserati, of not letting circumstances define who or what we are, but us actually driving and defining what those circumstances are. So I don't believe in limitations. I don't believe in ceilings. I don't believe in any of that. I believe that if any person on this earth can do something, I look them straight in the eye and tell them I think I can do it. And then I go about setting out backwards mapping that on figuring out how to do it. So, you know, I tell every man and woman when I go into prison, like, listen, this is the power and the promise of possibility. You can do whatever you want. I'm not any more special than anybody else, right? I'm just a man who read books and had a determination and decided. I made the decision that when that man gave me life in prison in that courtroom, you're not going to decide my fate. I'm going to decide my fate. And at the end of me deciding that fate, I'm going to hold up a Super Bowl trophy because I'm going to win. right? And so like I've kind of set out living my life like that. And so that's kind of the message that I deliver. And I believe that, tech and the knowledge-based economy has a lot to gain from using our value proposition, our intellect, and what we can bring to the table. Because when you look at like the content providers, right? It doesn't matter if it's a software as a service or whatever. We bring a very unique perspective with our lived experience to any product evolution, to any innovation, to any consumer-driven marketing piece. We see things that other people haven't seen. And vice versa. Chris has seen a whole lot of stuff that I haven't seen.
Right.
But what happens is if you get 10 or 15 people around the table who haven't seen the same shit, you come out with a better value proposition.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's really what I'm about, is how can we get the best idea and the best minds? And I think you can only do that through diversity and inclusion in all different types of populations.
I've seen more just because I'm older than you.
Oh, no, you seasoned, man. You seasoned. You be
Thanks.
reigning game, man.
That's right.
And speaking of reigning game, it's been raining game in here, man, with the big dog, Ken Oliver, bro. We really appreciate you pulling up and dropping these jewels on us, man, for real, bro. I say it all the time, bro. Presence is priceless, man, for real. So, man, appreciate you coming, dropping these jewels on us, blessing us with this game, blessing us with your journey. You know what I mean? Again, it's so much that can be taken away from that, man. That's so inspirational and so powerful. You know what I mean? So, again, got to give you your flowers, man, and continue to strive in the steps in the directions that you heading, bro. Because, like you said, this ain't it. It's still more to come.
No, for sure.
You know what I mean?
And I think it's important for all of us that have been successful, and I know the work that you do socially, too. It's important that we give back. I call this Harriet Tubman work. I mean, you can go, and I can go, and Erlan can go, and Jason can go and live and make a salary and go do our thing and live our life after, losing so much of ourselves and our families' lives. But it's incumbent. I couldn't sleep if I didn't go back and get the homies that are sitting in cages right now and provide space and opportunity for them. Because I'm blessed. Like for me to have like Stanford University and Mayor Brown and this kind of platform to talk about this stuff, like that's a privilege. Now I've now become one of the privileged folks, right? And it's incumbent upon us to reach back into those cats right now who are on lockdown, to those cats right now that are reading those books or in their last mile or in some type of program in some group, hoping, like Tupac said, for a better day, right? And that we provide that opportunity for them. We bring them to the other side and say, listen, this is how you can get to the places you want to go in life. There's a pathway, and we're making it for you. So I believe that's important for all of us to do.
Like the last mile say, paving the road to success.
Paving the road to success.
That's right.
Well, it's really great that we connected. The fact
we got big things to do, Chris.
I know we do. But the fact that you wrote us a note while you were in the shoe, and we're sitting here today talking about what we can do together, it's just miraculous. And
Isn't that crazy?
It gives people inspiration. And that's the thing. Like, we're doing this show for people to understand, get some transparency into what's happening, but they're also family members of those incarcerated. There's people inside that are going to hear this show, and to hear your inspirational story and to think, if Ken can do it, I can do it.
That's right.
And that's what you want them to think. So we really appreciate that you shared your story. A lot of things to come. So let's take it out.
Absolutely, absolutely. Stay tuned right here on Sirius XM. You're listening to The Last Mile Radio. It's going down. We're going to be back shortly.
Thanks again, Ken.
Thank you. Appreciate both of you.